This is Sammy Duet from Ghoatwhore, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us on Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We would like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Sammy Duet of Ghoatwhore.
Promoting their album that they released this past October entitled Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven. And they just returned, I guess, this past March from their winter tour of Europe.
Yeah, and they're going to be coming to Bloomington, Illinois, and Iowa City, Iowa. So if you're in our area, go see them.
Absolutely. Hey, let's get to that interview.
Good night.
Good night. Sammy, welcome to the Nothing Shocking podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Sammy, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. You got a great PR person, so she had nothing but fantastic things to say about you. We're excited to have you tonight.
I'm excited to be on your podcast.
Excellent. So, Ghoatwhore recently completed a winter tour this past February of parts of the United States, but mainly in Europe. Can you talk a little bit more about this past touring of Europe and, Florida, I believe?
Yeah, we did like 4 days in Florida with Heraklion and Caveman Cult, some very good friends of ours, some very great bands. If you're into any sort of extreme metal, I highly suggest you go check those bands out. But we did 4 dates in Florida. It was Pensacola, Miami, Tampa, and Orlando, and the shows were fantastic. And I believe that was the first real shows that we did in the United States for the new record, Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven.
Yes.
And that was basically like, we considered that to be a warm-up to the European tour, because like I said, we hadn't really played a lot of the songs that we were putting in the set list from the new record. So we did some warm-up shows. Those were the warm-up shows for the European tour. The European tour was fantastic. It was some great bands, Revocation, Alluvial, and Creeping Death, and it was amazing. It was probably one of the best tours I ever did in Europe.
As we're talking like post-COVID things here, can you kind of talk a little bit more about crowds? Are you getting, is it like post-COVID now, we don't have to worry about anything else? People are back coming out to the shows again. How's it working for you guys?
I mean, it seems like the people that are coming out to the shows post-COVID are, like, really excited. Like, it seems like the whole COVID thing was, it kind of kept people cooped up, and now you don't have to be cooped up anymore, and people are just like letting loose. So I guess it's almost like something was taken away from you from a while, and you kind of learn to have a new appreciation for it. You know,
very much so.
Can you talk a little bit about the venues over in Europe? What was your favorite venue you played?
Oh man, there were some pretty interesting ones on this one. Actually, some of my favorite ones were some of the really smaller ones we actually played. I believe it was in the Czech Republic. It was like this tiny, tiny place, and they had a wood-burning heater on the inside of the venue, and that was supplying the heat. So I'll tell you what kind of place that was. Yeah. And, you know, the show ended up just being maniacal because it was small, it was really intimate, and, like, people were just going crazy, and it was great. It was awesome. That was one of my favorite ones. I'm trying to think of any other ones that were really good. You know, Germany's usually always really good as far as, like, the venues going, as far as, like, the quality of the venues and the shows. Germany's usually on point all the time, you know, so.
Oh, very good. Well, this past October, Ghoatwhore released Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven album. Can you give our listeners an insight on the creative process of the band's latest album here?
The creative process. Well, that was how can I say this? That was my COVID project, was writing that record, because I had nothing else to do. You know, I mean, the future was so uncertain for us at that point in time, and for a lot of bands, you know, because our livelihood is playing live. You know, right. We don't make a whole bunch of money off of records and all that bullshit. You know, so playing live is where we pay our bills and get money and income. And that was, you know, torn away from us for a long time, you know, and nobody really knew what was going to happen next, you know. And nobody knew if we were ever going to play live in front of an audience again. You know, it was a very scary time for everyone. So I just utilized that time to write the new record. And, you know, and a lot of, I guess you can say some of that uncertain future kind of thing going on is definitely reflected in the new record, I would say.
Very good.
Let's just talk a little bit about the title track, Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven. That was a pretty cool song. Can you tell us a little bit about your your methodology behind, you know, your songwriting and coming up with your guitar parts? How's it work for you?
That song, oh man, that was like, I wrote that song in the middle of the writing process. You know, that was probably when I was well into like 6 or 7 songs. So I started experimenting with this melody thing. It's basically like the first couple of bars of the song, and I just recorded it and just started layering stuff on top of it and underneath it, and it just kind of developed into what it is. It's like when I write, I don't really think a whole lot. I just kind of go with what I'm feeling. Nice. It's not like I sit down and say, okay, I have this part and I have to have this kind of part next. I rarely think that way when I'm writing a song. It just kind of happens, you know. It's not a whole lot of thought goes into it, you know, to where it's like, unless it's like a part that is, I obviously know that's not going to work. But I just kind of roll with it the majority of the time, and whatever feels good or sounds good, which, you know, is 90% of the time, that's how I roll with my writing. It's just, like I said, not a whole lot of thought, just kind of go with what I think sounds good next, and not really a pre-planned thing. And just, you know, 90% of the time it works out.
Yeah, very good. Chapter 5, Death from Above, is my favorite track. Can you give us a little bit more of an insight of Death from Above? Is there a story behind it?
I know our singer was working on the lyrics, like, while we were writing for our album, I believe it came out in 2014, Constricting Rage of the Merciless. So he had the lyrical idea for that way back then. And I guess he just never found the right music to put the lyrics to. And I just presented the song to the rest of the guys, and he was like, this is perfect for this, and he made it work. As far as like the music goes, I mean, I was just, as you can tell, at that period of time, I was listening to a lot of punk rock. So that one kind of came out a little bit more punkier than the rest of them.
Maybe that's why I gravitate to it so much. So very good. Jeff, you got the next one?
Well, yeah, the other one I liked was Victory is the Lightning of Destruction.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's one of my favorites as well. That one's, just kind of, I hate to say it like this, but that's your kind of typical black and roll Ghoatwhore song, you know?
Very good. As I listen to the album and listen to track or chapter to chapter, I feel as though that the band takes a conceptual approach to the songwriting process. Do you feel like that's the way that you've always approached songwriting from album to album, or was this something a little bit different?
This one, it was a little bit different because I definitely had a mission in mind when I was writing the music for this record. You know, I wanted to make this the darkest, heaviest record I could possibly make. You know, I mean, like, just kind of, how can I put this? Like, to some of our past records, there was like this, for lack of a better term, a party vibe to it, I guess, because the black and roll kind of thing came through a lot more on our past records. Where this one, I kind of was like, the party's over. This is just going to be doom and gloom and evil and darkness, basically, like completely the whole way through. I mean, I guess, I was just a product of my environment from the whole fucking COVID thing, just being locked away in isolation,
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, with spring and summer upon us, what is Ghoatwhore's plans playing live? Festivals, traditional touring? What's coming up here for you guys?
We're going out, actually, in about 2 weeks. We're going out with some of our very good friends from New Orleans, Louisiana as well. We're going out with I Hate God for 3 weeks. And that should be pretty fun. Then we come home for a couple of weeks and we go back out, and we're doing some dates around the Milwaukee Metal Fest and the Hell in the Harbor Fest. And after that, there's something coming up, I believe, in September. I believe there's another thing coming up that I can't exactly talk about just yet.
Yeah.
Nice.
We always get that. We always get artists to say we can't talk about it yet. So
yeah.
Darn it, another one.
I know. I was looking at the list of places you guys are playing. I know you're kicking off the two in New Orleans, your hometown. Is that a place where I think it's at the Siberia? Is that a place you play a lot, or what's the scene like right now in New Orleans?
The funny thing about Siberia is it used to be the place where everyone played, and it shut down for a while. Then recently, some guys from around here that are in the scene here opened it back up and brought it back, and that's like the place to play again. So Siberia is definitely the place in the New Orleans area to play. If you're going to go see like underground metal and punk and just underground music in general, that's the place to go.
Yeah, very good.
Nice. I also saw coming to, or any of our Midwest listeners, they're coming to Bloomington, Illinois, and Iowa City, Iowa. Check them out.
Yep, sure enough.
Very good. Well, Ghoatwhore was established in 1997 with the Eclipse of Ages Into Black album. It was released back in 2000. And how has the band's songwriting and recording process evolved since 1997?
Well, the recording process, since 1997, obviously we have a little bit bigger budgets to make the record sound a little better nowadays. So that's definitely an improvement. As far as like the writing progress and all that stuff, I mean, I just find that we've gotten a lot more focused on what we want to achieve musically nowadays, to where the first couple of records were we were just kind of experimenting with what we wanted to do, you know. And of course we had all the same goal, but, you know, I think that we really, recently especially, is that we really honed in to the Ghoatwhore sound, for lack of a better term, you know.
Oh, very good. With Acid Bath being your previous band before Ghoatwhore, can you kind of give our listeners, and especially our metal listeners out there, a little bit of a contrast and similarity between the two bands, and how have you evolved from the songwriter and guitar player of Acid Bath into the songwriter and guitar player for Ghoatwhore?
That's an interesting question. The contrast is drastic. You know, Acid Bath was more like kind of like a psychedelic doom sludge band, and there were, you know, and then you have Ghoatwhore, which is like a black and death thrash band. So, you know, it's two sides of the spectrum as far as extreme metal goes, you know, because the Acid Bath stuff was a lot slower than the Ghoatwhore stuff. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But as far as like the writing that what I've become now is that I like I said before, I've just become more focused on more of the extreme stuff, I guess you could say, nowadays, rather than, you know, the Acid Bath stuff was a little bit more melodic and a little bit more slower. And, you know, my focus is, you know, people change. And, you know, with Acid Bath stuff, it was just, I was in a completely different mind frame than I am now with Ghoatwhore, you know. And another thing with Acid Bath stuff is, like, you know, one of the main songwriters in that band was the bass player. So it's, you know, it was really cool working with a bass player that actually wrote guitar parts, you know what I'm saying? Because he played guitar as well.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know, that's why that band has such a unique sound, because there were so many people involved in the writing process rather than, you know, me and someone else in Ghoatwhore writing the stuff all ourselves, you know?
Sure. Absolutely. Oh, very good.
The last album from 2017, Vengeful Ascension, had, I think, a bonus disc and had some live tracks and a cover song. Have you guys ever thought about doing a live album? Do you record any of your shows?
We record our live shows every now and then, but we have this curse that there's always something that comes out shitty on it.
Yeah.
Like, either it'll sound great and we'll perform awesome, but, like, the snare drum didn't come through on the recording or something dumb like that, you know? So we've definitely tried it, but many times we've tried to record live shows, but something always goes wrong in, like, the recording process, to where either, like, the guitar was out of tune just enough to make it sound like shit, or, like, some mic wasn't picking up a certain instrument or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well, how come you guys don't do it like how Judas Priest used to do it? You know, they would record, you know, like 2 or 3 songs, or they would record entire shows and then take the 2 and 3 best songs from each show and put them on one live album. Have you guys ever thought about doing that?
Yes, we have done that on an entire tour, and like I said, on every one of the recordings, something was messed up.
So you can't even put one together because it's all...
No. Like like he was saying, the bonus tracks on Vengeful Ascension, the live tracks on that, the very minimal live tracks that we have on that are all from those sessions that were the only ones that were salvageable.
Ghoatwhore has released 8 studio albums since 2000. Do you have a favorite album from the band's library, and do you have an album that you would say that, man, I'd like to have a redo on that album, and it's maybe not the best version of ourselves, I guess?
Man, I would really like to redo Funeral Dirge for the Rotting Sun, our second record. I would really like to re-record that eventually one day with a good budget and an actual good studio, because we did that on a shoestring budget in a very short amount of time. So I'd like to do that one again properly. And like, as far as my favorite, of course, obviously our new one, Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven, because I guess because it's just so still fresh in my mind, you know.
Yeah. So be it. Jeff, you got the next one you want?
Well, I guess just a little bit about the state of the music business and your perspective of how it works for your band as far as management, and does a band still need to have that manager guy that helps you out, hovers over you, or some bands are going to doing it themselves. How's it work for you guys?
Well, we have a manager, but I mean nowadays with the it's so easy to contact stuff, and if you really want to do it yourself, you can do it yourself. It's not a big deal. But I mean, we have been working with our manager for such a long time that it's just like, okay, if it's not broken, why fix it?
Yeah, they become a part of the band.
Basically. So I mean, it's not really a necessity nowadays, especially that it's so easy to just achieve so much stuff on your own. It all just depends on how driven you are to, put the work in to do this, Yeah.
Well, very good. As we talk about touring, for you, I guess maybe you could just speak for yourself, maybe not for the rest of the band, but in a perfect world, what is your preferred method of touring? Do you enjoy getting in the tour bus and doing it the old-fashioned way? Do you prefer the festivals, the one-off festivals, or do you like those weekend warrior things that the bands are doing now? Where are you at now with this part of your career?
Well, number one, we don't have a tour bus. We tour in a van. We still do it old school punk rock style.
Yeah.
And I mean, I just like playing live. So it doesn't, I prefer to do long tours. That's fine with me. I like it because it's not boring. There's always something going on. Festivals are fine. They're great. They're fun too. They have their perks. But as far as the weekend warrior stuff, I've never really been a fan of that because it's always like a tease. Just when you start gaining momentum and start kicking ass, you have to go back home and you lose that momentum.
I understand.
Yeah.
Very good.
Some bands do the backstage meet and greets, and some bands, walk off the stage and go right out to the crowd, to the T-shirt stand. How does it work for your band when you're touring?
Yeah, I try to go as soon as I'm done playing and packing up all my stuff. If there's time, I try to usually go out to the merch booth every night after we play and try to meet as many fans as I possibly can. So that's basically what I do, and usually a couple of us do that from the band, because it's just hurry up, pack your stuff, and I mean, what are you going to do? Just kind of sit around in a stinky backstage area and be bored,
Absolutely. After the spring and summer touring is completed this year or this season, what's next for Ghoatwhore? What are you guys going to be up to?
Probably touring more next year as well. I mean, we're getting kind of a late start on this record for the touring cycle. So definitely next year, I definitely want to be touring a lot more.
Very good. All right, well, I have one last question for you, then I'll leave you alone for the evening, and I'm not quite sure what Jeff's got. But I ask this to all of our guests, the mystery of rock and roll. It seems like it's vanished with the dawning of the internet and social media. There is no mystique anymore. We all know what Kiss is about. We all know now what Led Zeppelin was all about. But for you, the musician and the fan, what do you prefer? Do you prefer this new age of accessibility with artists, or do you miss those days of the mystery and mystique of rock and roll?
I definitely miss the mystique and mystery of the artist. It's like nowadays everything is exposed, and like you were saying back in the day, nobody knew what Kiss looked like.
Right.
It was like, are these guys like ghosts or something? I mean, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. So it's just almost like curiosity killed the cat,
Mm-hmm.
To where, but I definitely agree with you, to where rock and roll has definitely lost the mystique of what happens after the band or before the band gets on stage,
I agree.
I mean, nowadays you can look on the internet and find like Robert Plant's favorite meal, or some dumb shit like that.
Very much so. Jeff, do you have any more questions?
Well, yeah, I guess we didn't really talk about your guitars. Do you have a large guitar collection, or do you collect guitars, or how many do you take on the road with you?
Oh yes, I have a huge collection of guitars. That is something that I've been working on for many years, and it's definitely getting up there. So yes, I have something. I believe at this point I have something like 45 guitars, which,
nice.
Compared to a lot of collectors, that's not much, but the quality of the pieces that I have in my collection are all top notch.
Which one's your favorite?
So it's like nothing like something, it's never a guitar that I'm like not sure that I love. Everything that I'm like half-ass about, I get rid of it immediately and try to get something else,
Yeah. Which one's your favorite?
Mine, the ESP SD2, my signature model.
Nice.
Very nice. Well, we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything else that we left off tonight that you'd like to plug or promote?
Yeah, go out and buy Angels Hung from the Arches of Heaven. Like I said, buy it. Don't steal it. And come see us on tour whenever we come to your town. I would love to meet you.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, this is how things are going to work out. We're about 2 weeks behind, I would say, on our episodes, but we should have this episode out right when you guys kick off your April tour. Does that sound good?
Fantastic. You got it. Thank you guys for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Bye.
Everybody pulls the plug and says their last goodbyes. Move to the sunshine, fight the grip of nights. If they ever say